In the darkest days of World War II, Adolf Hitler became obsessed with a single idea: setting New York City on fire. It wasn't just fantasy. Nazi engineers were ordered to design massive long-range bombers that could cross the Atlantic, unleash destruction on American soil, and return safely to Europe. But how close did they actually get to making this nightmare real? Some say one of these planes even reached the skies above New York. Hitler wasn't just fighting a war on the battlefield. He was waging a psychological one in his own mind. He was fascinated, almost entertained, by the thought of enemy cities burning. Reports say he would watch films of Warsaw or London in flames as if they were a twisted kind of entertainment. And in his imagination, no target loomed larger than New York City. He believed that if Germany could strike America's greatest city, it would shock the United States into backing out of the war. The idea wasn't entirely new. As early as 1938, German planners had quietly floated the concept of a transatlantic bomber, a plane powerful enough to cross the ocean, unleash devastation, and return home. But it wasn't until early 1942, after the U.S. officially entered the war, that the plan became real. Codenamed the Amerika Bomber project, this mission would push German aviation to its absolute limits. Multiple designs were proposed, and some even made it to prototype stage. The race was on to create a weapon that could deliver Hitler's most dangerous dream, turning New York into ash. But among the proposals, one stood out as the frontrunner: a massive, futuristic aircraft designed by Messerschmitt. The plane that came to be known as the Me-264, or simply the Amerika Bomber. When Hitler demanded a plane that could cross the Atlantic, Messerschmitt answered with a bold proposal: the Me-264. On paper, it was everything the Reich dreamed of: a massive long-range bomber with 4 engines, a round fuselage, and a streamlined nose that looked decades ahead of its time. This wasn't just a war machine, it was meant to be a flying fortress. Inside, the crew would find bunk beds and even a small kitchen with hot plates, as if the designers expected them to live inside the aircraft for days. But as futuristic as it looked, the Me-264 was plagued with problems from the start. Its engines, Junker's Jumo 211 V12s, simply didn't have the power needed to lift such a heavy aircraft across the Atlantic. Later, they were swapped out for BMW engines, but the performance still wasn't enough. Test flights showed the Me-264 could fly, but handling was delicate, stability was poor, and takeoffs were dangerously unstable. The wings bore so much weight that drag slowed the aircraft to a crawl, making it a sitting duck for Allied fighters. Even worse, the first prototype was built without weapons or armor. Later versions tried to add defensive gun turrets, but every ounce of protection came at the cost of fuel and range, the very thing the plane needed most. By 1943, Germany's Navy had already lost faith in the project, preferring Junker's competing designs. The Luftwaffe soon followed, shifting focus to other bombers and eventually to jet aircraft like the Me-264. In the end, the dream of the Me-264 went up in flames, literally. Allied bombing raids destroyed the second prototype, the first was badly damaged, and the unfinished third was scrapped before it could ever fly. What was once Hitler's best hope of striking America became nothing more than wreckage. But Germany wasn't finished yet. Another company stepped in with an even more ambitious design, one that sparked some of the most mysterious rumors of the entire war. If the Me-264 was a disappointment, the Junkers Ju-390 was its mysterious successor, a giant 6-engine aircraft that seemed almost too powerful to be real. Built as an extended version of the Ju-290, the Ju-390 was designed for long-range reconnaissance and heavy bombing. Only 2 prototypes were ever built, but the legends surrounding them turned the aircraft into something larger than life. Test flights began in late 1943, and official reports claimed the Ju-390 performed well. But that's where the story becomes tangled in rumor and speculation. Some historians insist the aircraft was barely tested. Others claim it flew across Europe, over the Mediterranean, and even as far as Cape Town, South Africa. Then came the most explosive allegation of all, that one Ju-390 secretly crossed the Atlantic in 1944 and reached within sight of New York City. According to a British aviation magazine in the 1950s, prisoners of war even reported a successful 32-hour reconnaissance mission just miles off the American coast. The claim was sensational and also hotly contested. British intelligence dismissed the story, arguing that no hard evidence existed. But scattered testimonies kept surfacing, pilots swearing they flew the Ju-390 on long-haul missions, authors claiming it might have flown near Japan, and aviation enthusiasts insisting that Allied spotters saw it far from German airspace. Even to this day, the truth is unclear. Was the Ju-390 really capable of reaching American shores, or was it simply another wartime myth inflated by fear and propaganda? What we do know is this: despite the fascination it stirred, the Ju-390 project was canceled in 1944. The prototypes were dismantled or destroyed before the Allies could capture them. Yet the mystery never died. The thought of a German bomber circling over New York, even for just an hour, was enough to make the legend live on. And as the Ju-390 faded into speculation, German engineers turned to an even bigger monster, one with 6 engines, jet boosters, and the potential to become the most advanced bomber of the entire war. Just when it seemed German aviation had reached its limits, the Focke-Wulf company unveiled a design that looked like something out of science fiction. The TA-400 wasn't just another bomber, it was a flying superweapon. With 6 massive BMW radial engines and later plans to bolt on 2 jet engines for extra thrust, this machine was built for one purpose: global reach. On paper, it could fly up to 14,000 kilometers, more than enough to cross the Atlantic, hit New York, and keep flying. The TA-400's design was unlike anything the Luftwaffe had ever attempted. It carried a pressurized cockpit connected by a tunnel to the tail turret, had shoulder-mounted wings with a sharp dihedral angle, and was bristling with remotely operated turrets. 10 heavy cannons and multiple machine guns meant any Allied fighter foolish enough to intercept would be torn apart. It could haul over 50,000 pounds of bombs, double the capacity of most Allied bombers. In theory, this was the ultimate Amerika Bomber, but the reality was very different. Building the TA-400 required enormous amounts of labor and rare materials that Germany simply didn't have in 1943. Much of the design work was handed off to occupied French factories and subcontractors in Italy, but even with outside help, the costs were staggering. By late 1943, the Reichsluftfahrtministerium, the aviation ministry, pulled the plug. To them, the TA-400 was a fantasy project that Germany couldn't afford while fighting for survival. Still, rumors persisted that Kurt Tank, the designer behind the TA-400, tried to secretly continue development with Italian funding until the war's end. Whether or not those whispers were true, one fact was clear: the TA-400 never left the drawing board. And as Germany's dream of a 6-engine juggernaut collapsed, one final contender remained, a bomber that would cause bitter rivalries within the Nazi high command itself. While Messerschmitt and Junkers grabbed the headlines, Heinkel quietly tried to push its own contender into the race, the HE-277. On paper, it seemed promising, a derivative of the troubled HE-177 bomber, redesigned with 4 reliable engines instead of the experimental coupled engines that had plagued earlier models. With a wingspan of 40 meters and a maximum range of more than 11,000 kilometers, the HE-277 could have rivaled the Me-264 and even surpassed it in endurance. But the project was cursed from the start, not by engineering flaws, but by politics. Reichsmarshal Hermann Goering, head of the Luftwaffe, had grown furious with Heichel's previous failures. HE allegedly forbade the company from working on anything new until they fixed the disasters of the HE-177. Ernst Haeckel himself was forced to appeal directly to Hitler just to get approval for the 277's development. Even then, the support was half-hearted and resources were thin. The prototypes that did emerge were incomplete rough assemblies with little chance of ever taking to the skies. Thanks for watching, and if you thought this story was surprising, wait until you see the next one.